Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nutanix Chief Product and Development Officer, Sunil Podi.
Let's see, does this work? Yeah. So we didn't have time to change the video. We probably should have called it Trump 1. But maybe for the next .next. So I picked up this picture about 5-6 years ago at AWS's first reInvent conference, right? Nowadays, of course, it's probably the most popular infrastructure conference of all time. And the inspiration from it was like I really wanted to work in a company that aspired to solve a much larger problem, a problem the scope of what AWS was talking about 6 years ago. And if you really fast forward to where we are today with Nutanix and some of the feedback that we received with customers, I think we are well on our way to do this. And a lot of this is powered by our simple fact, and you've heard us say this again and again, is to keep things simple. And today we're going to talk about a lot of features that are coming net new. But I ask you to keep us honest, to make sure that we're keeping things simple while we're adding these features. So when Vinny and Rajiv come up to show some of the capabilities and the demos and so forth, let's see if we have held to our promise of keeping things simple while we are delivering more and more delightful features. And so today we're going to talk about how we are going beyond just being the AWS for the enterprise. Before we get into that, though, what I wanted to share with you was some of the feedback that we received about what the ability of the enterprise cloud platform can be delivered when you talk about it as from the perspective of in your terms. Like Dheeraj said, it's a combination of left brain and right brain. If you look at the feedback that we have received on Twitter in terms of what it means to actually consume and deliver Nutanix on your terms, on your control, to get your weekends back, the delight that, one-click upgrades. If you look at the fact that certain optimizations were built into the product, the fact that, a lot of your time was now elevated to focus on more of the interesting things rather than the more mundane things associated with operations and so forth. And not to mention support, awesome support. How many of you guys like Nutanix support? All right. So how about a round of applause for Nutanix support, not just the product, right? And that's the simplest thing, is that it allows us to focus on the most important things in life. And when we talk about it, I think one of the tweets that really captures the emotion, I think, for us is this is the kind of thing that fuels engineering, product, support inside the companies. We see this feedback coming from our customers and partners in terms of a constant iteration on reinforcement about what makes them happy, right? So hopefully some of the features that we're going to be talking about when we look at the full stack will resonate with that kind of capability. So before I delve into the broader strategy evolution, many of you know we have an awesome relationship with Dell as a strategic partner. We go to market with them pretty aggressively. In addition to selling Nutanix and Supermicro, we've expanded that with Lenovo. A new relationship that we have engendered basically mostly because of customer feedback in Cisco-specific accounts is to actually deliver the capability as software on Cisco C-Series, the rack mounts and so forth. And over the last quarter or so, we have now delivered Cisco software in conjunction with our partners to be consumed on C-Series, whether it be the 220 or the 240. Today we are announcing that we now extended the support from C-Series to now also leverage Nutanix software on any of the Cisco blades out there from the B-Series side, but also combine both compute-heavy B-Series blades with storage-heavy C-Series nodes so that you can truly build a composable fabric in your existing Cisco environment. And the net result being that, if I'm a large Cisco customer that has consolidated themselves or standardized themselves on Cisco hardware, and with some of the networking capabilities that we'll talk about, it offers an end-to-end solution from a Nutanix perspective for those Cisco customer base. So essentially, Cisco becomes a first-class citizen now in terms of the portfolio of elements. Clearly, the benefits of one-click upgrade and support and all those things still come through across any of these platforms. So when you take a look back, and Dheeraj talked about our evolution from being purely a standard hyper-converged vendor to what we call an enterprise cloud vendor. And when you look at this full thing in perspective, when you double-click into it and you look at the product roadmap, it's actually just not about the features. The features are only one dimension. There are multiple other dimensions to the way that the product roadmap is built out. Obviously, another dimension is how we actually capture these features, deliver them over various different platforms, but also how do we package these and deliver them across different market segments. And today we'll talk more, you'll hear this in the breakout sessions about what we're doing to actually go deeper into the service provider market, the branch office market, SMB market, and so forth. But when you put everything together, in a nutshell, the real focus is that we want to take our existing customer base and elevate them as we are transforming the data center to a higher order bit, where everybody, and I keep saying this, is that instead of a CIO, where every CEO is coming to a CIO and saying, look, I need to go to Amazon or something like that, eventually our hope is that the CIO becomes the CAO, the Chief Amazon Officer. And he's able to offer an Amazon-like experience to every one of his business needs. Some of it could be physically on the real Amazon. Some of it could be actually delivered within his enterprise using a Nutanix-like infrastructure to deliver an Amazon-like experience. So when you look at the full portfolio of capabilities, and precisely the reason that we talked about, a simple question comes to mind when you look at the next 5 to 10 years, right? And the question that comes to mind is the following, which is, if you look at the pundits, according to, as Dheeraj mentioned, at a very high level, folks talk about this fact that, look, but aren't everything going to the public cloud? Users are moving outside because of consumerization. Apps are moving to the cloud because of SaaS. So why is infrastructure still inside? And even the mainstream financial analysts are now saying this, right? If you look at the JPMC report, it actually talks about how in the next 5 years, 1/3 of your workloads will actually move out, and a whole slew of existing infrastructure vendors, the most obvious ones that are on the list here, will get impacted. So that begs the basic question, right? That begs the basic question that if everything is public cloud, so why not use public cloud for everything? Why even consider further investments in anything that replatforms the data center? And so we have a very simple, but I think high degree of conviction around why we think it's not a zero-sum game. And some of this is sort of manifested in the data points that are already being seen out there. I don't know how many of you guys have watched this movie. It was the 60s, the 70s movie. It was a pretty famous movie when I was growing up called The Great Escape. And Apple now has their single largest project, something that is going to cost them more than building the iPhone, is this project about building their data centers globally, worldwide. But most people, what they don't know is that Apple is today AWS's single largest customer. They do more than $1 billion. Every time you use an iPhone and you store something, it goes to S3, for example, right? And there's a reason why this transformation is happening, right? There's a reason why these are examples that are popping up left and right. And I think it's based on, for us, the following clarity. We think that every enterprise has a combination of these workloads. Essentially, broadly speaking, I have my enterprise productivity workloads such as Exchange, SharePoint, SAP, and so forth. And more or less, the predictability of that is well known. And then there are these marketing campaigns, Hadoop jobs, end-of-quarter reporting systems, or Thanksgiving Day, or seasonal holiday season kind of things that are unpredictable. And generally speaking, every mainstream enterprise, I'm not talking about eBay or the extreme .com cases like Bet365 or somebody like that, but most mainstream enterprises have a combination of about 70% predictable, about 30% unpredictable. Some cases may be 80-20, some cases may be 60-40, but generally this is the split. And if you really think about applying a public cloud to it, and you map it to the 3 primary characteristics. Is it quick, simple, easy to use? Absolutely. But when it actually comes to running a predictable workload on a public cloud, and there's various assets now being created to support this, but logic simply should support this fact, is that when you come to San Francisco for 3 days, it's always better to stay in a hotel. When you stay in San Francisco for a year, you'll probably lease an apartment. But if you're staying in San Francisco for 5, 10 years, somewhere around that neighborhood, you'll buy a house. Pure math says that. You will depreciate hardware after a certain point in time. It's always more cost effective to own at that point. So how do you solve for that last X while still retaining the simple and the ease of use of a public cloud, right? And so today, what do people do? So obviously, we have Amazon. Amazon has recreated with a combination of whether you call it Amazon or Azure. They have a unique architecture that powers the public cloud. We call it the A block for a second. And today, the only choice is the traditional stack. And the traditional stack, the reason why we're thinking of using this is because of cost, maybe, right? Because we own it, we control it. It's definitely not simple. It's definitely not, by the time it's installed, but it's, you get it up and going, you operate it and so forth. It's pretty complicated. And at the end of the day, even if the CapEx is manageable over 5, 10 years, the OpEx adds up. We all know that the true cost builds up over a traditional architecture. So clearly, that can't be the answer. The answer has to be something else. And in our opinion, and this is the fundamental premise for Nutanix, in our opinion, the answer only has to be the following, which is to take the exact same construct that powers the public cloud and make it available as a seamless one-click experience inside the enterprise. And if we did that, then we would be able to check all the boxes. Because you get the best of both worlds, right? You can start small, start quickly, and pay as you grow. So that's if I can call it the simple sort of clarity of conviction that we have, is to actually start with being the platform that enables this Amazon-like experience for the enterprise. Now, we said AWS, but in the last 12 months, based on both product and long-term view, it's become clear to us that it's not just the AWS for the enterprise, but the Amazon for the enterprise. Why do I say that? Because that Amazon for the enterprise does more than just AWS. We just haven't viscerally internalized it until today, right? And until the last couple of years. Is that Amazon is made up of 2 primary core competencies. It's both the one-click experience of commerce, the way that they have consumerized, not just retail, but also infrastructure, but then also delivered this with web scale capabilities in the cloud. And that essentially is what we're going to talk about on how we are aligning our product roadmap to. So if you take the first element, this concept of one-click experience, in the case of Amazon, it's pretty straightforward, right? They have really innovated across delivery with Prime, with consumption, with the interface, as well as with operations. We all know about their core competencies of warehouse management, the data-driven analytics, and so forth. And in many ways, Nutanix with Prism and Acropolis has evolved itself to provide a similar one-click experience across these 3 facets. And when we talk about delivery, and we'll talk about consumption, we'll talk about operations, let's start with how do we actually enable one-click delivery of applications. Many of you know, obviously, we started about 4 or 5 years ago as a small company, but in a very short period of time, we have rapidly expanded to cover the full gamut of applications, all the way from Avaya, UCS to SAP. And a major new announcement for us, which we've been working on with SAP for a while, is today we've announced support for SAP on AHV, so that the entire NetWeaver class, capabilities can now be certified and deployed on AHV stack end-to-end on Nutanix. So that's a major announcement from our side to actually enable SAP customers to consume a full-blown, Nutanix environment with built-in AHV one-click capabilities. And so when we look at the gamut of applications back again, and a partner here that has always been close to our heart, both from my own prior experience, but many of our Nutanix employees come from Citrix, but also many of our customers and channel partners have deployed Nutanix and Citrix together. And we continue to foster a very strategic relationship between the 2 companies. And to talk more about what we're doing next in terms of raising the bar, Let me invite Christian Riley on stage here. He's the CTO for Citrix. Give him a big round of applause, please. How you doing, buddy? I was telling Christian that obviously he's definitely a better-looking man, but he's also a smarter guy than I am because he was wise enough to see the election results and moved back to the UK 2 years ago.
Absolutely, I saw it coming. I saw it coming.
In fact, we need to.
I saw it coming.
You saw it coming. All right.
I saw the dawn.
All right. So, what are we going to talk about today, man? Tell us something about. By the way, I know that there are marketing partnerships, and we have kumbayas between companies and so forth. And I know that we've done some good work on core product technologies to create
Absolutely.
a 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Sure.
So maybe you can start with a few nuggets here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. So it's great to be on the stage here with you guys. And what a great conference already. We're only a few hours in, and it's already much better than any other conference I've ever been to, including our own, right?
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
it's really cool, right? Because if you think about just what Nutanix have done over the last 6 or 7 years, I met with Diraj when Nutanix was like this big, and I kind of sat there and I thought, my God, these guys are onto something. And 6 or 7 years later, what you guys done is absolutely awesome. I got to say that first of all. So, thank you. And what's really cool is that we, from Citrix perspective, have been a partner with Nutanix since the very, very early days. And as Sunil said, it's not just a case of reference architectures. Those things are important, but we share a very, very deep product relationship. So our engineering guys work with these engineering guys. In fact, many of those guys, as Sunil said, used to have Citrix accounts. They used to be Citrix employees. So we've got a really interesting relationship right at the very deep engineering level. And I talk a lot to customers and kind of going out there in the world and trying to figure out what's going on. And one thing that comes up over and over again, and you'll hear it throughout the theme of the conference, is simplicity. So before I joined Citrix, I was the CTO of a very, very big enterprise based in the US. And I can tell you that everybody I talk to, enterprise IT in general, is not getting any simpler. So if you think about all the challenges that enterprise IT has got, trying to deliver things with simplicity, trying to deliver things with performance, and trying to deliver things cost optimized, one of the great things that we announced recently with our friends at Nutanix was Instant On. So this is a tailor-made solution for VDI. Every customer that I talk to is now really interested in VDI. We've been saying for the last few years that every year is the year of VDI. But if you think about what's happened with the enterprise cloud platform that these guys have built, the simplicity of the data center, the next most obvious thing is to go after the workload. So everybody that I speak to is really interested in simplifying the delivery of apps and data. And so we built this Instant On, tailor-made solution, as I mentioned, for VDI. But the best thing about this, and again, it speaks to our engineering chops between the two companies, is that this has native integration with Citrix provisioning. So if you're familiar with the way that you deploy Citrix environment, you'll see that our native integration now from Citrix Studio directly into AHV for MCS-based provisioning really goes back to what you said something about making things simple.
Got it. So we talk about one-click apps, desktops, and obviously this is across the end-to-end portfolio of delivering applications, desktops, and mobile services end-to-end in the enterprise. Maybe why don't you spend a few minutes on giving a sneak peek into what we're working on going forward, Chris?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. When we start to think about end-user computing as workloads, everything, in my opinion, is beginning to converge. And I know it's kind of an overused term, but when you think about what we used to have with end-user computing, it was really all about trying to do VDI, trying to do remote apps. And then mobile came along, and it was a question of, how can I securely deliver apps to mobile, but not just native apps. I want to be able to, in many cases, provide access to a desktop or a remote app because for many, many reasons, it's too hard to create a mobile app for that environment, for that new mobile environment. So one of the things that we're doing is thinking about this perhaps a little bit differently than the market segregation of EMM and EUC, and thinking about this as unified endpoint management. So if I look out a little bit what's going on in the industry in general, I think there's going to be a huge shift away from classification of EMM and EUC, and that will become about unified endpoint management, and lots of things that we have will be part of that, and new things that we're doing will also give more flexibility. So as you can see here, one of the things that we've been working with is Citrix Cloud. And what this does initially is bring all the complexity of managing a Citrix environment away from you as the customers, away from the end user environment, and deploy that as a service in the Citrix cloud. So think about an abstracted control plane. So all the things that you love about Citrix, we manage all of that, and yet we leave the choice of where to deploy those workloads to the customer, because there's a number of reasons why people, as we said before, aren't ready to go full on into cloud. So being able to provide this environment that gives a managed control plane, but the flexibility of where to deploy. And of course, working with our friends again at Nutanix, making sure that the enterprise cloud platform is a first-class citizen in that. So think about the fact that you'll be able to choose where physically to deploy the enterprise cloud platform, and we abstract all that management, all that complexity away, giving you guys the opportunity to focus on simplifying your IT environment and freeing up resources for the huge challenges that are coming in things like digital transformation.
That's awesome, man. So before you go, I have one final question for you. Given that you've proven that you can see the future, who's going to win the Champions League this time?
Well, so being from Manchester, I'm obviously a Manchester City fan.
Hey.
So anybody that follows soccer will see that we beat Barcelona just last week. But I got to tell you, it's going to be Barcelona.
Barcelona?
Barcelona.
Wow. Does anybody agree? I guess it's all over the place here, man. Who wants Bayern Munich? Nobody. Or maybe a couple.
Who wants Manchester City? Oh, it's not to be just me then.
Thank you, sir.
All right, brother.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great conference, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. So I think when we look at we'll get Christian back up sometime again.